Have you ever sat through a strategy meeting, maybe, one where the stakes felt incredibly high, and you looked at the person leading the room, the CEO, the department head, whoever, and just had that sinking feeling like, wow, they're genuinely less capable than they seem confident?
Oh, absolutely. That feeling is almost universal, I think.
Right. And if it sounds familiar to you listening, well, you're definitely not alone. That feeling is actually the core idea of the research we're diving into today. We're looking at work by Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic, an organizational psychologist, and we're asking a question that kind of flips the usual leadership conversation on its head. We're calling this the incompetence trap.
Exactly. Because for years, maybe decades, the main discussion about leadership and gender has been, the pipeline problem. How do we fix the system? How do we get more really qualified women into those top roles?
Which is a valid question, of course.
A very valid question. But the source material we're looking at today asks something sharper, maybe more provocative. It asks, why do so many incompetent men get into leadership positions? And maybe even more critically, why do we keep choosing them?
And the consequences of getting that choice wrong, they're huge, aren't they? This isn't just about a bad quarter or a missed target. The research points to serious systemic damage within organizations.
Absolutely profound damage. When you have incompetent leadership, you see engagement levels just plummet. Trust completely evaporates, and you see burnout and stress levels just skyrocket among employees. It affects everything.
Yeah, you can picture it. It poisons the well, essentially.
It really does. I mean,
Yeah.
think about the real-world cost. Imagine an executive, super confident, but maybe not so confident, pushing through a project. Maybe it's a $500 million project. They ignore all the warnings from their capable team members, and it tanks. The damage isn't just the money lost, it's the message it sends down the line. It basically tells everyone else that competence doesn't matter as much as confidence.
And there's a psychological mechanism behind this, which I found fascinating. It's rooted in self-deception.
That's a key part of it. The data suggests, statistically speaking, men are more likely than women to overestimate their own abilities, their own talents.
Okay.
So if your goal, consciously or not, is to fool other people into thinking you're a better leader than you are, well, the easiest way to do that is to fool yourself first.
Ah, right. You have to believe it to sell it.
Precisely. That inflated, perhaps unearned self-confidence becomes the bedrock. It's what allows them to project this aura of capability that we then buy into.
Wow. So it's like a feedback loop. The leader deceives themselves, and that very self-deception is what makes them convincing to us, the selectors.
It creates this really vicious cycle. The person who's most fooled is often the leader themselves. And that specific quality, that unwavering, sometimes misplaced self-belief, is exactly what we culturally seem to find so appealing.
Okay, so let's unpack that. If these individuals, maybe fueled by this self-deception, keep rising to the top, it means we, the people hiring, the boards, even voters, we're falling into the same traps over and over. The research highlights three big psychological traps, doesn't it? That basically short-circuit our ability to judge well.
That's right, three main traps that lead us astray.
So the first one seems almost simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It's our failure to tell the difference between confidence and actual competence.
We just seem to be really bad at it. You see someone give a presentation, very bold, very certain.
Yeah, commanding the room.
Exactly. And our brains instantly translate that performance into high potential, or this person's a visionary. The fundamental problem is that confidence, how good you think you are, often has very, very little connection to competence, how good you actually are.
That phrase, very little overlap, really stood out to me. It's not just a small gap, it's minimal connection sometimes.
It's minimal. Think about in other fields, surgery, engineering. The best people aren't necessarily the loudest or the most boastful.
No, they're focused on the task, right? On the details.
They're focused on the problem itself, not on broadcasting how amazing they are. But in leadership, we seem to mistake the performance of confidence, which we often associate with certain traits like assertiveness.
Maybe traditionally masculine traits?
Often, yes. Assertiveness, decisiveness. We mistake that delivery style for actual substance, for actual ability.
Okay.
And the result, humble, quiet, but incredibly capable people get overlooked. They don't put on the show we expect.
Okay, but why? If confidence is often just surface level, why do we keep getting suckered in by the shiny presentation? And that seems to lead right into the second trap you mentioned, our fascination with charisma.
Ah, yes. Charisma. This is where things get really interesting, especially with the influence of media. Mass media, starting maybe around the 60s, and now turbocharged by the internet and social media. It's made us demand entertainment from our leaders.
We want them to be charming, witty, compelling storytellers, like
No.
celebrities.
Exactly. We want star quality.
Yeah.
But here's the critical disconnect. The skills needed to be an effective leader are fundamentally different from the skills needed to be, say, a great entertainer.
Right. You wouldn't hire a stand-up comic to run a complex organization, usually.
You wouldn't. We're confusing entertainment value with managerial skill, with strategic foresight. And the research argues that the best leaders, they're often defined by things like humility, careful planning, prudence, qualities that honestly can seem quite boring.
Boring but effective.
Boring but incredibly effective. The source uses a great example. Imagine trying to make a Hollywood blockbuster about Angela Merkel.
Okay.
The movie pitches. She wakes up, has a simple breakfast, goes to extremely well-prepared meetings.
Listens carefully.
Listens carefully, encourages different views, makes rational long-term decisions. There are no major scandals, no huge personal dramas.
Doesn't sound like a box office hit.
Not at all. It's the opposite of what makes a typical biopic exciting. We seem drawn to the drama, the flaws, the scandals of charismatic leaders, even when those same traits wreck organizations. Effective leadership, the kind that builds stability and prosperity, often just isn't cinematically thrilling. We're almost addicted to the drama incompetent charisma provides.
That addiction to drama, that feels like a perfect bridge to the third trap you identify, the allure of narcissism. We seem to be drawn to these larger-than-life, self-obsessed figures.
Yes, and it taps into something the research calls collective narcissism.
Collective narcissism, what's that exactly?
It's when we, as a group, admire someone else's intense self-regard because, on some level, it validates our own desires for importance or grandiosity. We see a leader projecting boundless confidence, maybe borderline arrogance.
Loving themselves, basically.
Absolutely. And we subconsciously think, wow, if they can feel that great about themselves, maybe I can too. I want to be part of that winning team, that feeling of greatness.
And it doesn't help that so much popular advice kind of feeds this, does it? All the love yourself no matter what, don't care what others think mantras.
Right. Those messages can be helpful in moderation, of course. But taken to an extreme, they can nurture this idea that your positive self-image doesn't need to be backed up by, actual achievements or ethical behavior. It decouples self-worth from external reality.
And the fallout for an organization led by someone like that.
It can be devastating. Narcissistic leaders often lack empathy. They struggle with impulse control. They tend to see leadership not as a service or responsibility, but as an entitlement, a platform for personal glory.
So they take huge risks.
Huge, often reckless risks, partly because they're genuinely blind to their own limitations. Their main drive is admiration and personal gain, which means integrity often takes a back seat. The organization's long-term health isn't the priority.
Whereas the truly effective leaders.
Effective leaders usually keep their narcissism in check. They do care about what people think, about their reputation, precisely because they prioritize ethical conduct and the well-being of their team. They understand that trust is built on integrity. And frankly, that's why they tend to have fewer of those big, dramatic scandals that grab our attention.
Okay, so this paints a pretty clear, if slightly depressing picture. Our default settings, biologically, culturally, seem wired to pick leaders based on confidence, charisma, and even narcissism, which means we filter out competent people and promote the self-deceived. So if this is so ingrained, how on earth do we fix it? How do we stop this cycle?
Well, the argument from the research is that the focus needs to shift completely, and we need to stop trying to fix the candidates or just get different candidates.
Don't focus on fixing us, the selectors.
Exactly. We need to fix the selection process and our own judgment within it. And the first absolutely critical step is just recognizing that mismatch, the pathological mismatch between the traits that seduce us and the traits we actually need in a leader.
Seductive versus necessary. I like that framing.
We have to consciously, deliberately stop selecting for confidence, charisma, and narcissism, and start selecting only for the necessary traits: competence, humility, and integrity.
Competence, humility, integrity. Competence feels somewhat measurable skills, track record. But humility and integrity, how do you actually measure those in, say, a hiring process? It feels subjective.
It's definitely harder than measuring technical skill, but not impossible. Humility isn't about being meek. It's about knowing your limits, being willing to say, I don't know, or I made a mistake. It's about wanting to learn from others. Integrity is about consistent ethical behavior, prioritizing the team or organization over personal gain.
So how do you suss that out? Not just in an interview, presumably.
Definitely not just in an interview. Interviews are performance stages. You need more robust methods. Things like thorough reference checks focusing on behavior, 360-degree feedback from past colleagues and subordinates, looking at actual track records of ethical decision-making and team success, maybe even situational judgment tests designed to probe these areas. It requires moving away from gut feelings based on a charming interview towards process-driven vetting.
Right. Less theater, more evidence.
Precisely. And here's something really encouraging from the research. Large-scale studies show a strong pattern. If organizations rigorously select for competence, humility, and integrity, the overall quality of their leadership dramatically improves.
That makes intuitive sense. Better ingredients, better cake.
Right. And, as an interesting side effect, not the primary goal, but a likely outcome, you'd probably see a higher proportion of female leaders. Why? Because statistical analyses consistently show women, on average, scoring higher on measures of humility, integrity, and self-awareness compared to men. The goal is better quality leaders, period. But focusing on these actual beneficial traits seems to correlate with more gender balance.
That's fascinating. So the aim isn't diversity for diversity's sake, but quality. And achieving quality leads to greater diversity because the desired traits are distributed differently.
Exactly. The goal is meritocracy based on the right merits.
Okay, that's the first solution. Focus on the right traits. The second one sounds harder psychologically. You mentioned we have to fundamentally distrust our own instincts.
Yeah, this is the tough one. Because most of us, especially people in hiring positions, believe we're pretty good judges of character.
We pride ourselves on it, right? I have good intuition about people.
We do. It's like the classic finding about sense of humor. Something like 90% of people think they have an above-average sense of humor, which is statistically impossible. We consistently overestimate our ability to accurately size people up based on gut feelings, especially in artificial situations like interviews.
So that whole go with your gut hiring advice, potentially terrible advice.
Potentially quite damaging, yes, especially when gut feeling is triggered by those seductive but misleading traits like charisma and confidence. The practical takeaway is we need to significantly dial back the importance we place on impressions made during those high-stakes performances. Job interviews, media appearances, big presentations.
Because those are basically invitations for bias.
They are practically designed to trigger our biases. They showcase performance, not underlying competence or character. We project our own prejudices onto the candidate's performance. We see the smooth talker and think leader, ignoring the quiet person with the stellar track record.
And trying to consciously fight that bias, that doesn't always work either, does it? Like unconscious bias training.
Research suggests it often backfires. It's like the old don't think of a pink elephant problem. The moment you tell yourself, don't focus on their confidence, focus on substance, your brain becomes hyper-aware of their confidence. The better approach is to design selection processes that minimize the opportunity for subjective bias to creep in. Focus relentlessly on objective data, on past behavior, on verifiable results. Circumvent the flawed instinct altogether.
Systems over subjective feelings. Okay, that makes sense. Which brings us to the third solution. This one seems to have two parts. Maintain high standards, but apply them universally.
Exactly. The first part is crucial. We absolutely should not try to solve the leadership problem by asking women, or anyone, to adopt the ineffective behaviors we're trying to eliminate. Telling women they just need to lean in more aggressively or focus more on self-promotion if they don't have the underlying competence and integrity. That's just asking them to mimic incompetent men.
Right, that doesn't improve leadership quality. It just changes the gender of the person displaying the problematic traits.
Precisely. We shouldn't encourage anyone, regardless of gender, to prioritize showmanship over substance. The standard should be competence, humility, integrity for everyone.
And the second part of that, about not ruling out competent men.
Yes. Just as we shouldn't promote incompetence in women, we also need to be careful not to overlook highly competent men simply because they don't fit our flawed, maybe outdated archetype of what a leader looks like.
The loud, assertive, dominant type.
Right. The quiet, thoughtful, process-driven man who focuses on results and team well-being, who might even seem a bit boring by charismatic standards. He might actually be the best leader for the job. We have to stop penalizing modesty and substance just because it doesn't come wrapped in swagger, regardless of who's exhibiting it.
So it boils down to valuing the right things, competence, humility, integrity consistently across the board using processes that limit our biases.
That's the core message. If we can make that shift, focusing on substance over style, and build systems that force us to distrust those initial, often misleading charismatic impressions, we will end up with better leaders.
So, wrapping this all up, this deep dive really suggests that improving leadership quality isn't primarily about changing the people applying for the jobs. It starts with us, with you listening, the person who judges, selects, or votes for leaders. We need to get better at spotting the real deal versus the shiny illusion.
Absolutely. We need to improve our own competence in selecting for competence. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening to mull over. If we accept the premise that traditional methods like interviews are flawed, that they invite bias and reward self-deception, what's one concrete process-based step you could implement, maybe even starting today, in your team or organization? Something standardized that doesn't rely on gut feel. How can you structure things to actively vet for actual competence, genuine humility, and proven integrity, rather than just being swayed by confidence or charm?
That's a real challenge. It requires rethinking some fundamental processes. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us into the incompetence trap. Lots to think about there. We'll catch you next time.